Welcome to this somatic practice, following the lineage of Thomas Hanna, the creator of clinical somatics, or otherwise known as clinical somatic education. Whenever you're ready, I'll invite you to come down to lie on your back. If the floor is particularly hard and you have maybe a folded blanket that could go under your sacrum, that might be a supportive addition. Otherwise, just make sure you're comfortable and you're in a space where you're not going to be disturbed for about the next 20 minutes. And as you come down to lie on your back, we're going to start with our knees bent. So the soles of the feet will be flat on the floor and have them roughly in line with your sit bones. See if you can find a distance between the legs where you can release effort from the legs without them falling. Might take a little shuffling or moving around. Have the arms laying out to the side. Take a moment here. You may choose to close the eyes. And you can just let the breath sink the body a little bit more into the floor, welcoming yourself into this moment, into this new position. Before we begin the movements, take a scan down the body. So starting from the head all the way down to the toes, trickling down awareness, the body. And just take a snapshot of your body as it is now, the areas of tension, the places where you're bearing the most weight on the ground. Getting an overall picture, as if from a bird's eye view, of what your body and your being feels and looks like in this moment. And dropping a layer deeper into the body, as if you could perceive the body from within. What is the overall impression of the landscape that you're existing in right now? Can you feel density in some places more than others? What do you notice about the two different sides of the body? Does one arm feel longer, for example? Take another breath or two to sweep awareness through the body, noticing what you notice. And then on your next inhale, I'll invite you to gently tilt the tailbone back into the floor so that there's a little arch between the lower back and the floor. And this does not need to be a large gap. You do not need to come to the full range of your movement for this movement to be effective. What I do want you to notice, though, is a little bit of activation or contraction in the muscles of the back, noticing that the back is now short and the front of the body is longer. And you can continue to breathe, but hold this activation in the back. You've tilted the tailbone back towards the floor, gently pressing it into the floor below. You're continuing to breathe and you're noticing the gap between the lower back and the floor, as well as the lengthening of the front body. One more breath. And on your next exhale, begin to melt the body back to a version of neutral. And this might take several breaths. And the approach isn't to return to where you were before in a kind of mechanical way. The invitation is really to melt, as if you're a piece of ice cream on a hot tarmac, spreading. The lower back spreads back to neutral. And notice it may not be the same version of neutral that you started with. When you feel like you've melted as much as you can, letting that melting spread to other parts of the body as well, imagine switching everything off, relax everything completely. Have a beautiful sigh out the mouth if that helps. Notice how you feel. And on your next out breath, we're going to fill the gap between the lower back and the floor. So the tailbone now will tuck up towards the ceiling gently, and there'll be a gentle pressure that supports the pressing of the lower back into the floor. And you might notice a little bit of activation in the core. But once again, this does not need to be a big movement. If there's any sense of strain or force, back off. And for a few breaths, we're going to gently continue to press the lower back towards the floor, whilst continuing to breathe, noticing that the back body now has become long and the front of the body has become slightly shorter. A few breaths, noticing how the rest of the body has responded to this movement as well. If there's any sense that the movement has been very much localized in the pelvis and it hasn't moved up through the rest of the spine, see what you can do to soften through the rib cage. And whenever you're ready, slowly melt to neutral. Take as many breaths as it requires, softening layer by layer, until you're at a version of neutral where you feel like you can switch everything off even more, relax everything, drop all effort in the body. Take a few breaths, notice how you feel. And whenever you're ready, we're going to move our awareness down to the pelvic bowl, so the bony pelvis, and you'll feel the sacrum on the floor. You'll feel the feet on the floor. And I'm going to ask you now to imagine this whole pelvic bowl as a steering wheel. It's like you've placed the image of a steering wheel into the bony pelvis. And your left hip bone, so to speak, is going to be one side of the steering wheel where you'd imagine putting your hands, as will the right side of the bony pelvis. So you can imagine almost having your hands at 3 and 9 on the steering wheel. Whenever you're ready, I'm going to get you to hitch one of the hips up just gently so that the 3 and 9 come off the central axis. One of the hip bones is coming up towards the rib cage. And once again, this is a tiny, subtle movement. It does not need to be large, and there should not be any strain. But once you've activated a little hitch of the hip upwards towards the upper body, keep it there, hold it gently, and continue to breathe for a few moments. Notice that that side of the body is now shorter, and notice that the other side of the body is slightly longer. And on your next out breath, you can slowly release that hip back to the central axis of 3 and 9 so that the steering wheel of the bony pelvis is looking straight ahead. It's been centered. Switch everything off, relax completely. Notice any changes, if they feel accessible, if there are any. And in your own timing, you can do that again. So we're going to do 2 repetitions on each side. You'll just hitch that same hip up, shortening that side of the body. Noticing the lengthening of the other side of the body. And after a few breaths, slowly releasing that hip back to neutral, bringing the hips back in line. And switching everything off, relaxing completely. when you feel to. We're going to hitch up the other hip, working on the opposite side now. And it can be a tiny movement. Notice if it feels any different to hitch up this other side. You're going to hold and sustain that hitching of the hip for a few breaths. So let yourself continue to breathe whilst maintaining the shortening on this new side and noticing the lengthening on the first side that you worked on. Noticing anything else you feel in the body as you sustain this hold. Continuing to breathe. Whenever you're ready, slowly melting that hip back to the central axis so that the hip bones are in line with one another. Switching everything off, relaxing completely. Noticing how you feel. And when you're ready, you can begin the second repetition, hitching up that hip, noticing the shortening of that side of the body, as well as the lengthening on the other side of the body. Holding that turned steering wheel gently, intentionally, as you continue to let the breath flow. When you're ready, you can slowly release that hip back down, centering the steering wheel of the bony pelvis. Relaxing everything, switch everything off. Notice how you feel in the pelvis. Notice how you feel in the rest of the body. Spread awareness through the body so that you can collect sensory data about this moment and about the effect of these pandiculations that you've just done. Do you notice any temperature change, any new sensations? If you felt tight before, how do you feel now? Are you more aware of your hips or your pelvis in any way? And did you notice any differences on either side? Was one side more fluid? Did it feel more accessible, easier to access? Take a beautiful out breath now. And you can either do this next movement with the knees bent, or you can extend them if that's comfortable for your lower back, and you might even try the two to see what feels best. But the next visual I'm going to offer you is that your pelvis, your bony pelvis, is a container, and it's holding soggy sand, so wet sand. And you're going to move your hips in such a way that you are shifting the sand to either side. So it's like you're kind of gently using a sand pan or a gold pan to sift the sand side to side. And this isn't a movement that generally feels natural, and we don't use it so much in daily life, so it can feel a bit hard to materialize, to embody. But if you're imagining that the bony pelvis is a pan or a container of some kind, and you're shifting the sand side to side. And notice if your core and your upper body starts doing the movement more so than the pelvis. You might notice you press a little bit into the floor with your feet in order to actually isolate the movement of the pelvis. And it's also possible that you don't feel anything, that it's a movement that feels inaccessible. I know it did for me when I first began, so that's why I preface with that. But just see what happens when you follow that image. See if anything in the pelvis comes online. And trying these new movements and placing the image into our body and then actualizing it, it can be very tiring. So if you're starting to feel like you're tired or maybe frustrated, That's part of the process of connecting the brain to the body in ways it may have forgotten or gotten out of habit with. But for a few more breaths, see what you can do to shift the sand between left hemisphere of the hip to the right hemisphere of the hip. And if you can start to speed that up, it can often be easier when we speed it up. So now you're kind of shuffling the sacrum, the buttocks, the pelvis side to side more quickly. You might sense that there's a generating of warmth or sensation here. Go as fast as you like, always staying within your level of comfort. And when you're ready, you can let that movement go, letting yourself feel the vibrations that have been generated by that more speedy movement. If you wish to, you can extend the legs if you haven't already. You could even extend the arms up over the head. Just have a beautiful exhale, maybe even a stretch over the head. And to finish, I'll invite you to bend the knees again so the soles of the feet are on the floor, and you can bring the hands to either side, so coming back to your first position. And doing another scan throughout the body. And taking your time to revisit this landscape which we visited at the beginning of the practice. And how does it feel now? How does it feel to embody this terrain now? Perhaps there are different sensations in the body, or you feel like you're a different shape to when you started. Maybe there's more weight in another part of the body now, or it feels a little bit more even how you're laid out on the floor. There's no right or wrong. We are collecting sensory data for the brain and the body to integrate. Noticing how you feel in your emotional realm, in your mental realm, the quality and the speed of the thoughts. And in your own timing, you can come back to the room you're in, come back to the moment, and complete this practice.